It is the photo shoot that turned deadly. A model was allegedly posing with a gun when it went off, shooting and killing the photographer, who was also her boyfriend. Investigators uncovered a bizarre social media history behind this woman. Even though she claimed the gun just went off, prosecutors and the witness who saw everything say this was not an accident. There is shocking new information in this case, including a photo of the model holding the gun just minutes before the fatal shot. Before we get deeper into this case, 3 people knew what happened during an impromptu photo shoot in Las Vegas: the suspect, a witness, and the victim. This photo shoot involved a knife and a gun. The suspect is 20-year-old Alessandra Blue. She is now facing an open murder charge with a deadly weapon. She told police it was an accident, but evidence and eyewitness accounts suggest otherwise. The victim was her boyfriend, the photographer. The witness says the model pointed the gun and fired intentionally. Police say the model had been posing with the gun just moments before the shooting. Shortly after, she fired the gun, killing her boyfriend. Authorities are reviewing social media videos, pictures, and messages that show the suspect frequently posing with weapons and talking about violence. Now, prosecutors say this tragic moment was not random, but the result of reckless and intentional behavior. The suspect continues to claim she did not mean to pull the trigger and that the gun went off by itself, but investigators do not believe her story. The case continues to unfold as police gather more evidence, interview witnesses, and review footage. The court will now decide whether this was an accident or intentional murder.
We have just learned new information in this case from a witness who explained why she believes this was not an accident but an intentional shooting. She says Alessandra Blue knowingly took the life of her boyfriend. There is also a photo from the deadly photo shoot, and it is shocking. This video came from Alessandra Blue's now deleted TikTok account. In that video, she posted images of guns, and police say she had an obsession with firearms. But that is not the only reason the witness believes this was not an accident. This is a picture of the victim, Mark Gowen. Here is what police say happened on August 23rd when Mark lost his life. Police were called to a house in Las Vegas just before 5 in the morning. The night before, Alessandra Blue and Mark, who had been dating for around 6 months, were at the home along with another man and woman who owned the house. All 4 of them, according to police, had been heavily drinking for hours. The witness told investigators that Blue complained she was not happy being in a relationship with Mark, who was a model and photographer. Around 4:30 in the morning, after drinking, Blue and the other girl decided to do a photo shoot. The witness told the grand jury that Mark had brought his gun to the house. Since he was drinking, she says her boyfriend checked the gun and cleared it, making sure there was no bullet in the chamber. The witness said Blue asked Mark to take Polaroid pictures of them outside. Their props for the photos included costumes, a knife, and a gun. Here is one of those photos taken from court evidence in Clark County, Nevada. That photo shows Alessandra Blue on the right holding a gun. The witness told the grand jury that she held the gun earlier in the night and it felt heavier now than before, as if someone had reloaded it after her boyfriend had cleared it. The witness described the moment of the shooting. She said she saw the flash from the Polaroid camera as Mark took a picture. She watched the photo print. Then Alessandra moved next to her and there was another flash that was much louder. Mark and the camera fell at the same time. The witness says that flash was not the Polaroid, it was the gun. But Blue told police she thought the gun was empty and did not know how it fired. It echoes the argument Alec Baldwin made in the Rust movie shooting, though this situation is very different. When the witness was asked what she thought Blue was doing when she shifted closer, she said she believed Blue pointed the gun at Mark. Blue also claimed she did not know much about guns and had not taken a gun safety class. But the witness told the grand jury that earlier that night she saw Mark and Alessandra handling the gun, taking it apart and putting it back together. Investigators also found videos on Blue's TikTok showing her photoshopping guns into pictures. She appears to have a bullseye tattoo on her chest. The witness also said Blue did not seem to care for Mark the same way he cared for her. She told Blue how much Mark cared, and Blue said she was disgusted by that and did not like calling Mark her boyfriend. The witness said Blue became violent. She took her phone, followed her private account, and said it was a secret account Mark did not know about. After that, they continued drinking, and Blue slammed the bottle down on Mark's body while he was asleep.
The witness says that Alessandra hit Mark in the ribs with the bottle. Knowing now that this relationship may have been one-sided, the question becomes, was Alessandra so upset, or in her words, disgusted with her boyfriend that she would want him dead? Is that the motive for murder? Prosecutors argue this was an intentional shooting. The witness told the grand jury that she believed the bottle incident showed where Alessandra's mindset was that night. Law enforcement searched her social media and found that she often talked about guns. Police say she once said she wished she could shoot people with real guns and get away with it. She also allegedly talked about wanting to shoot prostitutes and homeless people. In a conversation with Mark, he suggested they could practice by shooting a dummy. She allegedly replied that they needed to shoot someone real and that it would be in the tunnels for one night and the police would never figure it out. The detective on the case testified that Alessandra claimed she was joking, but she also told police she had a connection to a serial killer. According to authorities, she is the granddaughter of a man named Joseph Blue. In 2015, he was convicted of sexual assault in New Mexico, and police say he was a suspect in the murders of 11 women who were sex workers.
Those crimes happened between 2001 and 2005. Joining us now from Las Vegas to talk about this case is criminal defense attorney Michael Triano. Thank you for being with us on my channel. This story is unfolding in your city. I want to start with the charge that Alessandra Blue is facing. She is charged with open murder with a deadly weapon. What will prosecutors need to prove for her to be found guilty? Based on the facts known to the public, we know the victim was shot with a firearm, and we know the defendant fired that firearm. So we know the manner of death. The question at trial will be whether this was first-degree murder, meaning intentional and premeditated malice, or second-degree murder in Nevada, which is killing without premeditation but still intentional, or could it be voluntary manslaughter, which seems unlikely here because there is no heat of passion argument. The defense appears to be arguing accidental discharge similar to the Alec Baldwin case. The defendant claims she had no idea there was a bullet in the gun and that it just went off. However, there is a witness who told the grand jury that she believes this was intentional. The witness says the relationship was not great. They had conflict earlier in the evening, and there were signs of tension. What do you make of this witness suggesting Blue may have been upset enough to shoot him intentionally? The attorney says relationships are complex. Juries often consider the emotional dynamics and context rather than labels. There is nuance in relationships, and sometimes situations escalate. The jury will look at all circumstances leading up to the shooting and consider her state of mind.
The attorney explains that whether they called each other boyfriend and girlfriend does not change the fact there was a relationship. Based on the witness testimony, the victim seemed to have stronger feelings for the defendant than she had for him. Whether she felt the same may not be legally decisive, but she clearly viewed him in a demeaning way. There was an allegation she hit him with a liquor bottle while he was sleeping, and her reaction was cold and indifferent. It seems there was something going on in her mind that the jury will need to consider. The host then asks about grand jury testimony. We reviewed roughly 75 pages of it. When the public hears this kind of detailed witness account, how should they interpret it? The attorney says grand jury testimony is important for the public and attorneys because it previews what a trial may look like. Media can report the story, but reporters can sometimes misunderstand or mix details. The grand jury transcript is not filtered. It shows the raw statements and evidence in the case. It provides a clearer picture, free from media interpretation or confusion, and helps everyone understand what may unfold in court.
The attorney explains that grand jury testimony is simply reading what witnesses said, but grand juries are secret and one-sided. There is no cross-examination, so it does not represent what a real trial will look like. As the old saying goes, you can indict a ham sandwich. Grand jury testimony shows what the witness may say on direct examination, but everything changes once cross-examination begins and the defense challenges their memory and credibility. The host notes that if this witness testifies at trial, the defense will likely attack her credibility. One line stood out. The witness said she perceived that the defendant pointed the gun at Mark. The host questions the use of the word perceived, because in court, it is usually about what you actually saw, not what you thought. The attorney says it is a tricky point. We know Mark was shot. The question is whether she intentionally pointed the gun or if it was an accident. The gun was pointed in his direction, and it killed him. Whether she meant to do it is for the jury to decide.
From a legal strategy perspective, the defense will have to attack the witness's perception and challenge her interpretation. They must acknowledge the facts. The victim was shot and killed. The gun was pointed in his direction. The question becomes whether it was part of the photo shoot, whether she was joking, whether it was an accident, or whether she mishandled the gun. Anything other than intentionally aiming and firing with the intent to kill is what the defense will argue. They will suggest carelessness, recklessness, or misunderstanding rather than murder. The attorney says doing a photo shoot with a gun is already dangerous. The defendant claims she did not think the gun was loaded, but she clearly had knowledge of firearms and the gun did fire a bullet. There are photos of her holding the gun during the shoot and she pulled the trigger. So the question for a jury becomes whether this is first-degree murder, second-degree murder, or another charge. Could she walk free with a not guilty verdict? The lawyer says there is always a chance, but if the defense can at least remove first-degree murder from the table, that alone will feel like a victory. Second-degree murder could still apply. Voluntary manslaughter does not appear to fit because there is no evidence of heat of passion, no testimony of sudden rage or abuse. They might instead argue involuntary manslaughter if it was truly accidental. But the prosecution will push hard for first-degree murder. They will argue intentional killing. The defense will argue accident, and the jury will decide. Completely walking free would be difficult, given that someone died and she fired the gun. If the jury believes it was purely accidental, it could fit involuntary manslaughter, but prosecutors are unlikely to agree to anything less than murder.
The attorney explains that the debate comes down to whether this was an accident or reckless behavior. He says she was playing with a gun, and that is not an accident. Whether she knew it was loaded or not, that is reckless endangerment at minimum. He believes the best case scenario for her would be involuntary manslaughter. There were only 3 people who truly know what happened: the witness, the defendant, and the victim, who could no longer speak. Police say she had a fascination with guns and violence. There were messages online showing interest in guns. The witness said everyone was drinking heavily that night and that the defendant did not feel good about the relationship. Then the gun fired. We do not know if she intentionally pointed it to kill him or if it was reckless behavior. The attorney says that question will be the entire focus of the trial. They will look at what happened and why it happened. If the defendant testifies, that will be a major challenge. He says the background information will be a big issue before trial. The defense will argue that her interest in guns is irrelevant. They will say hobby or interest does not equal motive. They will argue that evidence like photos or online comments should be excluded. The prosecution will try to show a pattern and mindset. The defense will fight to keep that evidence out and focus only on what happened in that moment. Pretrial motions will determine how much of that background the jury hears, and the defense will insist the state meet its burden of proof.
The attorney notes that the story about her grandfather is unusual and will draw attention, but the question is whether it would be allowed in court. The defendant mentioned she was related to a serial killer, and police said he was suspected in the murders of 11 sex workers in New Mexico between 2001 and 2005. Police referenced this in grand jury testimony. The attorney explains that information like that only comes into trial if the defendant herself made statements about it to police or posted about it online.
The officer testified at the grand jury because the defendant did not appear, which is normal. Defendants rarely testify in grand jury proceedings. If she made social media posts or wrote about her fascination with her grandfather, then prosecutors could potentially introduce it. But without her own words, it would likely be excluded. Since it seems she did brag about it to a friend, there is a chance it could come into trial because your own words can be used against you. The host then asks about trial strategy and whether the defendant would have to testify. The witness is likely to be a key part of the prosecution's case. The attorney explains that defendants are rarely required to testify. He says many clients ask for percentages or odds, but there is no fixed formula. Whether she testifies will depend on strategy, risk, and how the evidence unfolds.
The attorney says he never gives percentages because there are too many variables in criminal defense. It is always a discussion between the defendant and her legal team. Some clients should never take the stand, even if they are innocent, because cross-examination from a trained prosecutor can be devastating. Even telling your own story can be difficult when your freedom is on the line. If a defendant testifies, they must speak calmly, clearly, and consistently, and then face cross-examination. The prosecutor will likely challenge every detail, and the jury will watch closely. It is risky, rare, and dangerous, but it will be a conversation because there are only 3 people present and only 2 of them are alive. The host then asks how confident a defense attorney would feel fighting a murder 1 charge. The attorney says an open murder charge is always an uphill battle. They do not file those charges lightly. People can be found not guilty or convicted of lesser charges, but it requires a fight, strategy, and determination. He says he has handled cases with worse facts and still achieved successful results. The host thanks him for joining. The attorney thanks him back. The segment ends with the show's outro, inviting viewers to subscribe and watch next time.